Hey, beautiful creatives. Welcome to Life I Design, the podcast. Thanks for joining me, your host, Nicki Traikos. I'm an artist, letterer, instructor, and creative business owner. I started and built Life I Design from home while raising a family and learning how to juggle it all. This podcast is my way of pulling back the curtain and inviting you to step into my home studio so we can get candid about all things art, business, and life so I can help you create a life that you design. Hey, fellow creative. I am really excited about today's episode and hope that you've been enjoying the last few episodes where I share some of my favorite tools, watercolor tips, and philosophy around learning. My goal for this podcast is really to share some insight with you around art and creating art so I can help make it less intimidating and more approachable. Less intimidating, more approachable. I really like that, actually. That's how I would love to have experienced art when I was younger. I find it really interesting how we view visual arts and the idea of being an artist or creating art. There are such polar opposite views around art and art as a viable business or a career that nowadays I kind of laugh off the negative reactions that I get. Unfortunately, I still get them. And I just love on the positive ones. Let me explain a bit. Okay, I'm going a bit off topic here, but stick with me before we start this episode. I think the idea of making art is less intimidating and more approachable. And it's important for me to say that because I feel like in some cases, art isn't really taken seriously by people. I've had many conversations with different people over the years who I may have just met. Maybe we're in a social situation and exchanging the polite chit chat, which I'm really not good at. But when I told them I was an artist and I worked from home, I could tell instantly, just by the expression on their face, that they didn't regard art as being a valued career or a job or even just a valid business. They'd kind of smile, and I knew instantly they didn't respect art or what I did or take me seriously at all. If they only knew, right? It used to frustrate me, and I used to let it bother me sometimes. Actually, no, I used to let it bother me. Now I kind of laugh it off, and I feel badly for them because they don't get to experience all the amazing feelings and things that I get to do that art offers me. And then on the flip side, I feel like some people are intimidated by art and the art world, even though they may have a natural calling themselves to paint or to create or explore their interests, and they don't. And why don't they? Because they regard it so highly, they shy away from it. I know that was me for a while before I actually started doing art. These are such polar opposite viewpoints, but I've experienced both over and over again over the years. And I hope this little podcast of mine can help make art less intimidating and more approachable. Sound good? Okay, so for this episode, we're on episode number 9. I can't believe it. I'm chatting with you about how to create a productive workspace at home so you can make more art, enjoy the process of making art, and so you can share your art too. Sound good? Okay, let's dive in. So today we're chatting about creating a productive workspace in your home. This is a little bit easier than you think, probably. I think this topic is really important with our current situation, and I want to help you create a physical space, but also a mental space for creating. Having a dedicated space in your home where you can be productive and create art can be a luxury for some of us. Back when I was a makeup artist, I needed a studio space where clients could come and have their makeup done. We didn't have an extra room in the house, so every time I had a client appointment, I had to tidy up the kids' toys, make sure the house was clean and fresh, and I had to set up a small table to put my makeup on, and I had to set up my director's chair. I had to make sure the light was bright enough if it was an evening appointment. And then I had to get myself physically prepared too, to do my job as well. So physically and mentally, I had to get out of the mommy at home role to the makeup artist role. So do you know how much of a pain that was to get everything set up each and every time I had a client? But making a good first impression was important, along with wanting the person sitting in my chair to feel comfortable and to really take what I was doing seriously was huge for me. I eventually was able to set up a dedicated space in our basement, but I still had to make sure the kids' toys were put away and that the path to get to the basement was clear of any Lego pieces. Have you ever stepped on a Lego piece? Seriously, it kills. So I share this story because for the last 13 years or so, I really have had the luxury of having a dedicated studio space where I can set up my laptop, my art supplies, my printer, my scanner, etc. And I don't have to worry about putting it away or if someone's going to knock it over or step on it. Even if you have a dedicated room for your art practice, maybe it's not set up where you feel that you can be productive or creative. So I'm hoping the tips that I'll be sharing in this episode will help you with some of that. I'm a creature of my environment big time. I'm quite sensitive to my surroundings, and I can feel unsettled or antsy pretty quickly. If I'm in a messy, chaotic environment, I really do sense it. My surroundings affect my mood, they affect my energy, and can even affect my creative flow. So if you can relate at all, I'm going to give you my best tips for creating not only a productive, but an inspiring space too. So before we begin, I want to quickly chat about creating the inner space to allow for more productivity, allowing you to create and be in the flow. So you may not have an open, bright, and inspiring studio that you can spend all your waking hours in and painting and creating. Doesn't that sound amazing? How many of us really do, really? Even I spend probably 50% of my time on my emails and administration tasks and marketing and planning. I don't even get to spend all of my time in the studio painting, but I make space for it always. So daily, in fact, even if it's just for a few minutes, even if my desk is a mess or my dishes are piled up or I'm exhausted from the day, it may only be a few minutes working in an art journal or picking up a paintbrush or even a pen, maybe even a charcoal stick. I just try to make some marks. I try to do the best that I can with the time and the energy that I have. So, what I'm trying to say here is even if your outer space isn't ideal, it doesn't matter. Make sure you honor your art practice, your desires, and your passions, and find a way just to create that art. Okay? Even if it's not ideal, just do it. Don't overthink it. So deciding that art is just as important as brushing your teeth, you will decide that you will paint and that you will letter. And don't let anything change your mind, okay? So let your inner talk be something like, I am painting for me. I'm painting because it makes me happy. I'm painting and it's important. And I will just take out the supplies and I'll just do it. Okay, so decide today that your art is important and important enough to unpack every day and pack it up at the end of your practice if you don't have the luxury to keep it out. Because when you do, you will be so much happier that you did. You will feel more energetic and you'll be inspired to be more creative. When you express that creative side, it's like opening a tap. At first, it kind of just trickles out and then it flows with ease and with force. Okay, so I first recommend that you work on your inner space so that you can be more productive and creative. Okay, make your decisions based on what's best for you and the time that you have available and just do it. Okay, don't wait until things are perfect because trust me, there will never be a more perfect time or a perfect space than just jumping in and doing it. Okay, so let's move on to our outer workspace. I recommend that you do your best to set up at least a table. A little table, doesn't have to be a big one. Go to IKEA. You can pick your legs, your tabletop, even grab a rolling cart while you're at it. Grab a comfy chair. That's really important. And I even suggest a desk lamp or a floor lamp so you've got some great lighting. Oh, and if you're at IKEA, I suggest grabbing a plant and a candle and some of those really great ginger thin cookies to go along with your coffee that you're going to enjoy as you light your candle and you sit down to a painting session. Seriously, I get carried away at IKEA. My painting table is from IKEA actually, and I can adjust the height of the legs depending on if I want to stand to paint or sit to paint. I have a plastic 5-drawer shelf that holds most of my acrylic painting supplies, paper towels, etc. It doesn't have to be fancy, okay? Don't make it complicated. Just really all you need is a table, a great chair, good lighting, and inspiration around you. So what would I love instead? I'd probably love a big wooden antique table with all of, the old knots and even dried paint and scratches everywhere. I'd love an antique chest of drawers that have like multiple size cubbies and storage. But if I overthink what I'd really love to have and what I imagine my studio to be like, I wouldn't be productive, would I? I just make excuses and I would not paint. I would just wait until the moment where I felt like I had everything in place so that I could start painting. Don't wait for that moment. It won't come. It may come. Actually, I shouldn't say that. That's not very positive of me. It could come. It absolutely could, but don't make excuses while waiting for it, is what I need to say. Okay? So I want you to use a table that you have at home or go out and get one so that you can start painting like today. If you can, carve out a dedicated space in your house. So create a nook in your living room if you don't have an extra room. Maybe even carve out a little nook in your bedroom. Even head down to the basement and make sure you've got lots of lighting. Okay? A comfy chair, again, is something that you will definitely need. And then somewhere to store your art supplies. So a rolling cart is really great. Hey, even like a pimped out bar cart would be so cool and inspiring. That'd be actually a fun project. I'm going to keep that one in mind. Go to your local thrift shop. You can reclaim an old piece of furniture with drawers. That'll be great for storing things like your watercolor paintings and papers that you may have, supplies that maybe you don't use very often. So you can even paint a reclaimed old piece of furniture and start getting inspired by that. Honestly, though, I'm not kidding about the plants and candles. Okay, so one thing I recommend is that once you have your essentials in place, it's really important to make the space cozy and inspiring and creatively charged with your favorite things. So allow your personality to shine in your workspace. Do things like hanging inspiring art on the walls, hang your own art on the walls. You'll be able to really step back and look at your art and think about ways that you can change it or improve it. You can tape color studies and mood boards around you, things that make you happy. Play some great music, put on a podcast, or enjoy the silence and the quiet. That's what I tend to do in the mornings, especially. When you walk into a space that speaks to you, you will be even more inspired to sit down and to paint, to practice, and to create. Guaranteed, you will be so much more productive and inspired to create more. So, even though I don't have the space that I dream of or the desk that I'd love to paint on, I make my space a place that I want to spend time in by adding things like I said, plants, candles, good lighting, and interesting containers to hold my art supplies in. I add elements of me into that space. I shared on my Instagram this really cool, it's like a 3-tiered dish that my mom recently gave me. It's from the 70s, from my childhood. I remember she used to store things like nuts and desserts and things like that when we had company. It's blue glazed ceramic from the 70s. Like I said, it's really cool looking. So my mom gave it to me. I took it, and you know what I did with it? I put my tubes of watercolor paints on a layer, charcoal sticks sit in another tier, and even my oil pastels. I love it. It's on my desk. It reminds me of my childhood. I can see all of my supplies perfectly without having to dig for them, which then makes me more productive because I can spend more time using the supplies versus having to try to remember where I stored them. Okay, now you have your space set up. You need to work on having your tools organized and handy, like I just described. If I'm working on a collection of watercolors, I make sure to have all my paints, my brushes, and paper out and handy. Because I work in multiple mediums, I tend to have a lot of supplies. So instead of spending my time finding stuff, I have boxes and baskets and drawers dedicated to that specific medium. For example, all of my pointed pens and inks have a drawer in a cabinet so I can easily find what I need and take out what I need when I'm working on calligraphy. All of my acrylic paints are in big decorative boxes that I tend to stack on the floor because I use them less often and for big paintings. I know I don't need them every day, but I know where they are when I need to grab them. So, working on organizing your supplies so that they make sense to you and that they're handy is something that I recommend you do. I find having them placed in boxes and baskets and drawers keeps them tidy but also out of the way. So even though I have a dedicated studio space, we all use it as an exit to the backyard. So I have a sliding door, which is amazing because I get great light coming into the studio, but it's meant to be a family room. And I use it as my studio. It's actually a really nice space. But it's also one of the ways we get into the backyard. So I have to make sure that people coming in and out first off, can walk through, and secondly, aren't having to look at all of my supplies laid out everywhere. So having them organized is really important, okay? So now let's move on to my last tip to help you create a productive workspace at home. I feel like we covered a lot, but I have one more thing that I hope will help you. When we live with others, we tend not to always have the privacy that we need, the peace that we need, or even sometimes the time that we need to create art and be productive. So when COVID hit and we were all social distancing at home, I loved it actually. I had everyone at home and I was really enjoying their company. My son was away at university. My husband traveled a lot for work. So to have all four of us home together was really welcomed until I realized that my quiet time during the day was interrupted, like constantly. I mean, all the time. I have teenagers, so not little ones running around who just can't help themselves. I have full grown people living in my house, and I was still being constantly interrupted. So, in order to continue to be productive, I had to tell them how important it was for me to have uninterrupted time so that I could think, paint, create, plan. So the 50 million questions I get asked during the day, like what's for dinner, or what are you doing, or can I go out, or where's the chips, etc., etc., they were all interruptions. I had to go as far as hanging a blanket over the doorway of my studio because I don't have a door. It's like a nice double kind of entranceway. Um, but again, it wasn't ideal. So I had to make it work. I hung up this blanket and said to my family, when the blanket is up, that means I am working on something and I need just quiet time. Please don't interrupt me. So do you know what they did? They still interrupted me, but they'd come in. It was really funny. They'd come in, move the blanket over, and then they'd whisper the question as if it wasn't really interrupting if they whispered it. It was really funny. But when I was in a flow and they were just stopping by to check on me or to say hi, I'd sometimes get annoyed. Really, it wasn't all that bad. I still got lots done and even found ways to keep them occupied so that I wouldn't be interrupted. But I want you to have conversations with the people that you live with and to let them know how important it is for you to have that time to be creative and to be productive. Okay. So when you show the respect that you deserve, they will show you that respect in turn. Okay. You can't always force creativity. So when you get into that productive flow, you want to enjoy it while you've got it, and interruptions can really disrupt it. Okay. So, one last quick tip before we close up this episode here. I want you to learn to let go of stuff. Okay. I spent many years using the time in the morning when I was most productive, energetic, and clear headed to do things like tidy the house after everyone left for school or work. Okay. I used to make the beds, put dishes away, throw in a load of laundry, and then I'd make a cup of coffee, sit down to paint. But by that time, it was like 11ish. I'd have to get lunch ready for the kids. And then by the time they came home for lunch, went back to school, I'd have maybe 2 hours tops before they'd come home again. And we'd have snacks and race off to activities. So, what could have been a 6 hour day of like uninterrupted, really productive time for me really only turned into a couple of hours, maybe two hours of really productive, uninterrupted time. But afternoons, I had low energy. I was slumping. So what I realized was I was wasting all of that high energy, daytime, morning, productive hours. And so I flipped the switch. I left the beds unmade. I left the kitchen a mess. That was a huge one for me, actually. I just walked past it all. I went into my creative, organized, cozy space, and I got to work. That's the only way I could have made working from home and raising kids work. Okay, so I want you to give yourself permission to put your creative practice first sometimes. The dishes and the kitchen tidying was done while the kids snacked after school, and it also gave us time to chat about their day. The kids learned to make their beds, so I checked that off my list, and laundry was done in the evening when everyone is home and in between things that we had going on. So flip that switch and you'll see your productivity soar. Okay, so before we wrap it up, I want to share something really exciting with you. I am really happy to be a part of the 5th annual Art Bundle for Good, where more than 75 artists have contributed over 100 art courses and resources to help raise money for Courageous Kitchen. It's a Bangkok-based charity that helps refugees. So the bundle is valued at over $4,500, but it's on sale for $97. The sale starts on November 12th and it runs until the 16th. I have donated a watercolor leaf class that I know you're going to love. If you'd like to learn more about the bundle, you can visit my website, lifebydesign.com, and grab your bundle of classes. I know I will. I am so excited. There are so many great artists and instructors who I admire and follow, and I'm excited to take their classes too. So that's it, my fellow creatives. This was a big episode, I think, and one that I hope helps you create not only a physical space to be more productive, but also the mental space that you need to be more productive. Okay? So I'd love to hear what you thought of this episode. Take a snapshot, post it on your Instagram feed, or tag me on _the podcast, or even Design, whichever one, and let me know what tips spoke to you the most. As always, if you're enjoying these episodes, please go ahead and rate it on Apple iTunes, and that will just help others find the podcast, and maybe they'll feel less intimidated by art so they can create more art too. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Have a good one.